bear arms. Federal right, and then the Ohio Constitution backs it up, and through Supreme Court law also, and I'm in danger of talking like a lawyer here, so bring me in at any time. It doesn't say you have to go out on a range for 2 hours to keep and bear arms. So that's an infringement in my mind, that you have to go out and do that. And then if you think about in Ohio, you can actually open carry a handgun. You have that right under the Ohio Constitution and Supreme Court interpretation thereof. So in other words, if I am an Ohioan and I'm out there somewhere in Ohio and I have a gun on my hip and it's loaded, I can walk down the street as long as there's no law that prohibits me from being in a particular place. And there are exceptions, like, you know, with churches, if they don't want you in there, and things like businesses that have posted, you can't carry a gun in there, or you can't walk in a sheriff's office, you know, and walk back where the prisoners are. You can't, there are places that you can't do that. You can't go into the airport. But all the other places, you can have that. And nowhere did anybody ever say that you had to take a range requirement to be able to do that. So we have that right. And here's what we forget. You know, we look at this through the lens of, we shouldn't be able to do that. Well, why not? It's our constitutional right as Americans. We are allowed to keep and bear arms. All these things that make us think otherwise are the result of not just, you know, a score of infringements, but thousands of them that have taken place across our country over the history of our country. And my bill does a few little things to roll this back to the freedom of the people to exercise a constitutional right.
Can you talk about, obviously, if
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my apologies.
You mentioned the 4 hours of change from the as introduced. Can you talk about some of the other changes that you're making to the bill?
That the bill makes?
Or that, is there a substitute version of the bill?
Specifically with the concealed carry course?
Yeah, or actually any other changes that you're making to this legislation?
Well, and, you know, I went through those bullet points, and there are actually more things than I had in the bullet points. And you can look at the bill. I actually have the sub-bill here. If folks would like to have the sub-bill, we have everything available.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So what's the difference in the sub-bill?
Okay, can someone help me with that? Jim?
I can comment on a couple of them. The training is one. In the initial bill, there was not a training hour requirement. It was just a content requirement. So the hourly requirement has been added back into that.
Which is 4?
4 hours, yes. And that's, with training, on the training, the big misnomer is that that's solving a problem for us. It's not. A lot of states have no training requirement at all. They've never had it. Indiana, Pennsylvania, 2 neighboring states. When we did this 10 years ago, I looked at data to see, do they have more accidents? Is there a problem? They both had less total accidents and less per capita accidents than Ohio did. We had no concealed carry at the time. So it doesn't do what everyone thinks it will do. It's, that said, I'm also an MMA instructor. I'm a huge advocate of training. I take personally well over the excess 12 hours on an annual basis just to further my own knowledge and skills. So I always recommend people get as much training as they need. But the critical thing is for your person who's under the gun, who's under the attack, what's important for them is that they have the gun available to them, not all this tactical stuff. That's nice to have, but it's the must-have is I must be able to have the gun with me. And so by getting the training to something reasonable, you'll allow a lot more people, especially the disadvantaged or the poor, whether you don't have enough money or you don't have enough time, really busy people, the ability to get a license and carry that gun. Another thing this does is it opens up for the Attorney General, some of his inspectors to classify as law enforcement officers is one of the changes in this. The military that we discussed so that their license will not expire, whether they got their license before they went in the military or after.